Let's talk about one of the most interesting and visually significant moments in Matt Reeves' The Batman from 2022. This one here. Now, there are a bunch of interesting technical elements and decisions that work to make this moment as striking as it is. So I wanted to take a closer look at a few key shots and share what I think makes them so cinematically noteworthy. So without beating around the bush, let's get straight into it. Thematically speaking, this scene is about one emotion: hope. So all the technical and cinematographic elements here had to work together to bring that emotion to the forefront of the audience's experience. The flare is the central physical element that captures this sentiment, and when a light source like this is used, a source that is originating in the film's world, it's known as diegetic lighting. And Reeves seems to really like to push the boundaries of diegetic lighting in his work. But in this scene here, there are some other really interesting diegetic light sources for us to consider. So let's rewind a bit to where I actually want to start this breakdown from. This moment here, which to me is a pretty interesting use of diegetic lighting. It would have probably been easier for the filmmakers to use a singularly coloured stage light flickering in the dark to create this visual texture of the light bouncing off the water. But that probably wouldn't have led to the same dynamism that's created by the contrasting blue and red of a sinking GCPD card. It takes this from being not just a diegetic light source, but a dynamic light source too, and it adds a really nice subtle visual conflict between the cold blue and the warm red, and in doing so, creates an immediately more interesting shot. Maybe this choice was influenced by colour theory, but considering the instinctive approach Reeves took to the colour palette of this film,
there were certain colors that we started drawing into our palette, and then they were always there, and we would just look at what we were shooting, and Greig would sometimes, he could dial it in, and he could say, is this right for this scene? And there were some places where
I would argue that this is just an example of when it's more about making a shot more striking than symbolic. Still, maybe there is actually some symbolic intention behind the use of the sinking GCPD car to show that finally Batman's vigilante status is changing for the better. I'll let you decide that. In the meantime, there's a little bit more to the use of the dynamic light source here that I find quite interesting from a technical perspective. It gradually peters out and ultimately fails, which seems to me like a really effective way of gently moving the audience from the previous and very chaotically lit sequence into the calmer, singularly coloured atmosphere that's about to be thrust upon us. Not only would it be a much bumpier, more sudden visual transition if it just suddenly went black when Batman hits the water, but it's also a really nice example of how Greig Fraser and the film's lead colorist David Cole used lighting and color to subliminally cue the audience into certain emotional responses. This failing, flickering light, followed by a moment of total darkness, makes this one feel much more impactful. And now we're back here, where I want to draw your attention to the blocking. Because even though the slightly high-angled extreme wide shot that Greig Fraser gives us is the perfect way to frame flare-wielding Batman amidst the chaos whilst helping us get a better grasp of the scene's geography, this shot choice really just appears to be a vehicle for some greater and more subtle visual storytelling. Reeves and Fraser make very artistic use of the Y-axis in their approach to blocking here, with Batman moving more vertically through the frame as he wades towards the collapsed scaffolding centered here at the top of the frame. Taken together with how Batman is generally positioned as the tallest and most authoritative figure in every frame from here on in, the compositions throughout this entire sequence hit all the right thematic notes for this moment in the story. Through their subtle verticality, they help visually communicate the idea of Batman rising up in the estimations of the people of Gotham, and finally starting to achieve that good old hero status he's most commonly associated with. In short, these are the shots that bring about Batman's transformation into a hero. And in doing so, they highlight one of the most striking aspects of this sequence, which is how Reeves uses all these technical aspects, the lighting, the blocking, the shot choices, as tools to juxtapose Batman's transition into a symbol of hope with the uncertainty still surrounding his image in the eyes of the Gothamites.
Please don't hurt me.
Take these shots here, for instance, that make use of this low-angled shot from the perspective of the survivors, peering up at the brightly lit but oddly obscure and poorly defined figure of Batman, which is a pretty nice way of visually conveying their hesitancy to accept this newer, more hopeful idea of the Batman. It isn't until this little lad reaches up and is helped out of the water that Batman's image becomes briefly more defined against the hopeful light of the flare, which fortunately cues a more trusting vibe in the other survivors, at which point we pull back to a wide shot framing everyone in the scene together and giving us a glimpse of these guys over here, reacting very differently to Batman compared to how they did just a few moments prior. And how about that thematic resonance of it being Mitchell's son who reaches up first, the boy who has appeared in most of the film's major moments? Is this symbolic of the fallout caused by Riddler's chaos finally coming to an end? Or is it signalling the reconciliation of Bruce's vengeful vigilante persona with his emotionally scarred, vulnerable orphan persona? Maybe it's both, but either way, along with this entire final sequence and the subsequent epilogue type sequence mirroring the film's opening, which it does really nicely,
I'm vengeance.
Including Mitchell's son here serves as a really satisfying way of bringing the story's narrative full circle. And speaking of satisfying, how can I not mention this final bird's eye view shot? A perfectly balanced composition that just screams stability and solidarity, with everyone in the frame moving in unison in one common direction, sharing one common emotion as they converge on Batman and his beacon of hope and heroism. In most other films, such a sentiment would be cheesy. Here though, it's art. Now with all that said, the thing I want to leave you on is actually the sound design, because this is the first and only time in the entire film that the world of Gotham fades away and the film's score completely takes over. And it's when Batman lights the flare that this happens. Imagine, if you will, what this stadium would actually be sounding like at this moment. People are screaming, yelling, crying, water is gushing in, metal is creaking, objects are slamming into each other. It's the epitome of stress, which Reeves does let us hear for a very brief moment. And he could have let us hear this throughout, but this scene is about hope, and where we have the visual cue of Batman as the sole source of light in the darkness, it's not just the visuals alone that make the moment here. It's also the decision to make Michael Giacchino's score the only audible sound. When the flare is lit, it quite literally burns away the sound of the mayhem. This approach to the sound design, combined with the bright, warm red of the flare, very quickly and calmly tunes us out of the chaos and creates an aura of tranquility throughout the scene. It's simple, it's not overly in your face or pretentious, and it's one of the many fine examples of how Reeves, Fraser, Cole, and the sound team blend their visual and oral storytelling so well with the central themes of each key moment. Greig Fraser's cinematography here is undeniably amazing, but it's with the help of these other areas that Reeves and the team behind the Batman could breathe the cinematic life into this moment of heroic transformation and make it such a striking and memorable example of this film's audio-visual storytelling. Once again, there are so many levels to the beauty of cinematic moments like this and how we experience it, and ironically, I've still only scratched the surface here. I guess all we can do is keep appreciating and learning from all the interesting things these artists and filmmakers are doing. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed the video and thank you very much for watching.